the discussion this morning by sending us your messages via WhatsApp on 0809 4440981. We're also streaming live on YouTube at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. You can join the live stream as well. All right, now this morning, joining me to analyze the stories, I have with me Devoe and Lakunle. Very good morning to you, gentlemen. Good to have you on this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Lagos. Lakunle, AY, a cool new governance.
I don't know why.
Good morning, AY. Good morning, Devoe. Good morning, Lagos. Good to be here again this morning.
All righty, let's get right into the stories making around from the front. Of course, still talking about subsidy, which is what is on everybody's lips at the moment. Now, the House of Representatives has called for the forensic audit of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited to determine its assets and liabilities, as well as its current market value. What are your thoughts on this development?
Yes. Like we said, a cool new government. A lot of postures and different moves are being taken on all sides of government, especially now with a lot of focus on the center, whilst maybe with time we'll start getting some news at the subnational state level, because there are also new governments in place. Now, the House of Representatives have called for forensic audit of the NNPC Limited. Remember, that's the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, to determine its assets and liabilities as well as the current market value. Now, which company are they referring to? If you remember, about sometime last year, there was a morphing of the NNPC as we knew it, that was the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, into a limited liability company. More or less, the government commercialized both its services and ownership. And at that time, the findings from the ad hoc committee in the legislature found that assets were worth about 64 billion. That's dollars. That's about 28 trillion naira. Was unveiled by the former Mohammed Buhari administration during the transfer. But in the transfer, only about 58 billion, that's 26 trillion, at the last official rate of 450 to a dollar, was transferred, leaving a balance of 2 trillion unaccounted. Now, the ad hoc committee recommended that the NNPC Limited should reassess its accounting system. That's resolution 1. Now, if you were all aware, and I think by now we've been seeing the whole outcome of the president's position on the subsidy, when he mentioned OT law in English, that means it's gone, right? Now, to that effect, just about a day or 48 hours from that time, the NNPC Limited published a new pricing point at 488 to about 570, depending on where you buy it. And when people in outrage were questioning what, why, where, how, the NNPC, through its CEO, Lakunle Kekere, was stating that this was done because since they're no longer owned by government, what it means is that they must publish how they go about raising capital or operating. And he then gave some history as to how the subsidy came about and how it was managed through the NNPC back in the day when they were still fully under the federal government. And then they had to go into some kind of under recovery or direct purchase, direct buyer. Basically, the NNPC was running the subsidy regime at source. And when the PIA was enacted, it killed that opportunity. So because the federal government could not fund the subsidy at that moment, money was coming from the NNPC. NNPC was using its own resources to fund the subsidy regime. Now, obviously, a lot of this is opaque to a lot of people. It's not as transparent as people would want it to be. To that extent, that was when we started hearing the figures of, oh, the NNPC was spending 100 billion a month. That rose from 100 billion to about 400 billion a month, which was the last figure at the time that they were to elapse the 6.7 trillion. That's the 7 trillion naira challenge on subsidy. So NNPC told everyone, including the federal government, that you are still owing us the money you took from our operations to the tune of 2.8 trillion naira. So, I mean, there are many mixed reactions to all of this money and how it was spent, whether Nigerians actually consumed all of that, who was it paid to. Now, the ad hoc committee had resolved prior to this time to have, done an audit on the NNPC. It was raised by Ibrahim Isiaka. Now, the truth is this, right? We've seen many forensic audits take place in this country. By now, you would have expected to have heard the position of the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Midstream Downstream Authority. However, it seems as if in this country, whenever forensic audits are called for, and forensic means you're going to go deep into the issue and really uncover the nitty-gritty, who, what, where, how. It seems whenever we come to forensic audits on behalf of government, we end up with what they call the last scene. Honorable Minister, off your mic. Honorable Minister, off your mic. That was the last major forensic audit that was done by the federal government. That was in the case of the NNDC. NDDC.
Yes.
And we never got to the end of it. Even the one that was done on some other state governments, we've never really gotten to that. So we hope that this new government will, and that's also the National Assembly once they inaugurated, will actually drive this to a logical conclusion. For justice to be seen, we need transparency. And a lot of money has passed in and out of NNPC. Remember, they told us that 50% is owned by the people, whether that is a true reflection of the ownership or not. But we want the NNPC to work in the interest of Nigerians. So this is just early days. We look to see whether and how far they will go in this forensic audits.
We really hope something comes out, because of course, people as you enter, there's always the auditing, but never anything coming out of it. So we really hope that this will turn out to be different. Now, Lakunle, let's talk taxes here. Now, this is coming from The Nation, and Nigeria and other members of the African Union are taking steps to enact legislation to attract additional revenue of $220 billion from taxes. Also, there are moves to boost generation by approximately $40 billion from cross-border transactions. What are your thoughts on this, Lakunle? Lakunle, it seems like you're muted, or it seems like we're having some technical issues there. Let me come back to you, Devoe, real quick. And let's talk about something interesting here. Let's talk about Nigeria Air. And when I saw this story, I actually had a very good laugh about this. This is coming from The Punch. Now, the House of Representatives has poked holes in the purported launch of Nigeria Air at the twilight of the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari, declaring it a fraud.
You want to try 36?
Okay, let me see here. When technology decides to do its thing, this tends to happen. Apologies for that. All right, from the Daily Trust, talking about the food crisis. Now, some key farmers in the country on Tuesday raised the alarm that a food crisis is looming in Nigeria as a result of myriads of challenges facing the agricultural sector. Luckily, are you with us now? Luckily, can you hear us? It looks like there's a technical issue here, so that we get Lakunle back on. We can hear you loud and clear, Lakunle. I'm just wondering if you can hear us as well.
All right. Yes, I'm back.
All right, fantastic.
Right. So
all right, go on, Lakunle, we can hear you.
yeah, can you repeat the story again so that I can know which one we're speaking?
Food crisis.
Yeah, talking about food crisis. Some key farmers in the country on Tuesday raised the alarm that food crisis is looming in Nigeria as a result of myriads of challenges facing agricultural sector. This is coming out of the Daily Trust newspaper.
Right. Okay. So normally every year the UNICEF would make their projections across the world. And January this year, they made the projection that 25 million Nigerians are subject or at a risk of hunger in the middle months of June, July, August, and some part of September. And most vulnerable being children and nursing mothers in particular. Now, they attributed that to what they call the violence in the Bay Area. The Bay Area means Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe axis. The flooding that occurred and destroyed about almost 700,000 hectares of farmland and a few other skirmishes here and there within the country. But having said that, the year before, the projection for 2022 was 17 million. This year is 25 million, which means that every year, for 2 consecutive years, the number of people at risk of hunger has increased. Now, why has that happened? At the press briefing by the Farm Commodities Association, the president of that association claims that, for example, the Anchor Borrowers Program is moribund. Then the question that comes to my mind immediately is that, does it then mean that because a government that started the program is leaving office, then that program must die with that government?
I mean,
we all praised
what happens to continuity?
Exactly. We've all praised what that Anchor Borrowers Program has done in terms of funding rice farmers, I think some wheat farming as well, and a few and other staples that are that keeps Nigeria going. Now, if that is the case, is it that the government has lost interest in that program? Is it that the people who have benefited, the president says that the last set of people that benefited from that program was 2020. What happened in 2021? What happened in 2022? Is it that the people who are taking in 2020 and before are not paying back? Is it that they are seeing the monies they received as their own share of the national cake, as we are supposed to, as we are wont to do? These are the questions that we need the government or the people or the president of this association to also provide. When we have these answers, we'll be able to say, okay, so what are the problems? And it's also now on Mr. President to take a quick review of this, look at what needs to be done on a quick basis. That is, the first thing to be done is to appoint competent people to man the Ministry of Agriculture and all the agencies that are responsible and act on food production. Our research institutes that research agricultural programs on agriculture, poultry, animal husbandry, all of these things must be put together. We should have a comprehensive national policy on all these things that can be followed day to day, month on month, year on year towards solving this problem. We cannot every year come back to say we are not able to produce enough maize because flood. We are not able to produce enough beans because violence. How about going to places where these things don't happen and be deliberate about creating spots where these things can be done? A country that is smaller than one state in Nigeria feeds itself and exports food. The landmass of Niger is about 2.5 times the size of, or maybe 3 times the size of the Netherlands. We never hear the Netherlands say, and Netherlands is a country that's below sea level. We never hear them say that they suffer food. Well, here we are. If you scratch the wall behind you, Ayo, and put a grain of maize inside, tomorrow without watering it, that maize will grow. So what is the problem with us in Nigeria that we cannot feed ourselves? When we say national security, in my opinion, the feeding of a people is #1 security that people should worry about, because a country that feeds itself is perhaps the most secured country in the world. This is where we should be headed. And we should not be making excuses about flooding. We know floods will happen every year. We know
something
that
that's
in having
and
skirmishes,
it's something that obviously that you should be planning against, knowing it's going to happen.
Exactly. So making them as excuses why we will not have food in this age and time, for me, is like we're just resigned to fate. We're not being deliberate about curbing these things to make them work for us rather than it's working for us.
All right, thank you for that, Lakunle. You're listening to Smooth 98.1. Freshly Pressed will continue on the other side of this short break. Stay with us. Was something smelling?
No, but my point was it was hot. It was extremely hot.
Okay,
So
okay.
obviously, but they're coming from a cooler side. This place will be extremely stuffy when they get inside here. I thought they were fix you guys ACs.
It was actually cooler earlier on.
Because there's no ventilation, and it's anti-COVID principles. Okay, we're doing number 7. Yes.
This I was laughing when I was laughing.
We get to some
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1, your love music, love live station. Once again, you can be a part of the discussion this morning by sending your messages via WhatsApp on 0809 4440981. We're also streaming live on YouTube. It's at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. All right, let's get into the story from the Punch, and it has to do with Nigeria Air. Now, the House of Representatives has poked holes in the purported launch of Nigeria Air at the twilight of the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari, declaring it a fraud.
Yes, we said before, it's a new government. Already, as usual, with every administration in transit, that's when the old has gone and the new has come. A lot of dust, a lot of worms begin to crawl out of the woodwork, and even under tables that are so neat and clean. You wonder how a worm exists on a clean table. But you see, the House of Reps also yesterday, they poked holes unanimously in the purported launch of the Nigeria Air, that's Nigeria's national carrier, at the twilight of the former President Buhari, declaring it a fraud. Now, Chairman of the House Committee on Aviation, Inole Naji, declared this, that the major stakeholders in the deal between the federal government and the Ethiopian Airlines denied knowledge of the launch. That's on one side. Now, the Ministry of Aviation, in their own response, claimed that Nigeria Air was only unveiled and not launched. Those are very weighty words, which the committee dismissed as an attempt to divert lawmakers' attention. You see, this is coming after the fact, because if you remember when it took place, it was done in public viewing.
It was done very public. It was on TV. It was everywhere.
At that point, despite the kickback by many stakeholders, what we heard was a terminology referred to as a static display. Now, we know already that this Air Nigeria launch was rife with all manner of kickbacks. And when I say kickbacks, there are lots of agitation already going on by major stakeholders in the industry. Now, it was, let's call it a project, one of the big projects of the former aviation minister, Hadi Sirika, who worked his 8 years to see this come to pass, right? And at the last minute, just before they went away, just within a space of a week, we saw a bird carrying the Nigerian Air insignia. Now, already the airline operators of Nigeria had taken the minister and the ministry to court on 3 separate suits to stop this transaction on behalf of the federal government, raising many issues of how it would be detrimental to the domestic aviation industry. Now, many points have been raised by many key, both past and present airline aviation operators, both on the regulator side and even on the private sector side. They also queried the ownership structure because at various points in time, we had different purported owners of the Nigeria Air, which came out at the end of the day to claim that they had no part to play. And even amongst the ownership structure, the 49% that was granted to Ethiopian Air, the question was at how much was that shareholding sold? What did Nigeria make? Some of these facts are quite opaque. Now, the NCAA, that's the regulatory agency, also did not grant that aircraft that showed up in Nigeria an air operating certificate, which was a regulatory process for safety to ensure any airline that wants to operate is properly grounded. So that's why many feel that the minister had arm-twisted NAMA in presenting it with what he referred to as static display. However, I mean, many observers did notice that that same aircraft, which was branded Nigeria Air, was actually a registered Ethiopian airline, which was in commercial flights. So
and it's back in service already.
Yeah, I said to the surprise of many, as usual, government gymnastics. Just a few days after, that same Nigeria Air branded craft went back to Ethiopia, took off its Nigerian clothes and wore back its Ethiopian clothes and went back into service. I mean, Nollywood doesn't get better than the Nigerian government. So the truth is this, right? It sounds funny that we're saying these things, but these are actual stories of maladministration. And I think we can clearly say that now because so many people have spoken against it and the opaqueness at which this transaction took place. And then the amount of money that was expended by the Ministry of Aviation and how those amounts have not been accounted for. Two questions I asked. One, where was the House Committee on Aviation all through this period? What was the noise that was made by them? Because for us to also understand how they represented us properly, we need to see the facts all the way down. Two, is it going to stop just like the forensic audits we heard of the NNPC or the one that was done for the NDDC, that's the Niger Delta Development Corporation, where ministers were being asked to off their mics? Are we going to see resolutions and consequences? Because that is the whole idea in trying to bring about a government that works. We can't just continue wiping slates clean. And like I said, how does a worm exist on a clean slate? That is the case in this country. We just cannot continue whitewashing away, not just the corruption, the crime that has been taking place. We must see adequate consequences take place for us to begin to believe in whatever move they intend to make next in the interest of Nigerians.
Let's go to WhatsApp really quickly here. This is from Ajay. He says, good morning. Actually, we need to know what the new NNPCL is all about, especially the ownership structure, and if it's now a private concern, why it's still controlling our oil sector. Therefore, from Twitter, it says, what really beats my imagination is why the outgoing administration had to indulge with such unnecessary hypocrisy and propaganda by advertising in Nigeria Air, which doesn't exist. Only God talks and does 100%. So Buhari's former cronies shouldn't have wasted their time trying to make that president look immortal. And Joachim says, as far as agriculture is concerned, we have a yields problem, a security problem, a transportation problem, and a storage problem. The yields problem has defied solution over time because we are not serious about increasing agricultural productivity. All right, then let's go back to some more stories here. And I'm coming back to you on this one, Lakunle. Coming from the Vanguard, the Senate has approved the request of President Bola Tinubu to appoint 20 special advisors. His request was read on Tuesday by the President of the Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan.
Right. So it's rather not supposed to be something that should be a big matter because as far as I know, and I've gone to cross-check again today, the Constitution does not require Mr. President to seek the approval of the National Assembly in appointing a special advisors. If you check the Constitution of Nigeria, there are only 3 lines that mentions special advisor in relation to the president. The first one says, I'll try to just be quick about it. The president may appoint any person as a special advisor to assist him in the performance of his functions. That is section 151, subsection 1. 2, the number of such advisors and their remuneration and allowances shall be prescribed by law or by resolution of the National Assembly. Any appointment made pursuant to the provisions of this section shall be at the pleasure of the president and shall cease when the president ceases to hold office. So, having read this 3, even the appointment of his secretary to the government of the federation is not subject to the approval of the National Assembly according to our constitution. It is the only thing there is to say that the National Assembly can say, okay, this is how much they should earn, or this is the number of special advisors we should have. So I want to assume that Mr. President writing to the National Assembly is just a matter of courtesy to say I am appointing. So, or maybe it's that the reports that use the word approve wrongly in reporting that story to us. But okay, so having been done, let's assume that he actually wrote. I think that he just wrote for that purpose, courtesy, and that's all there is to that story as far as I know and in my best opinion.
All right, thank you for that, Lakunle. Now, really quickly, let's take a look at the story because of time coming from the Daily Post. The Senate on Tuesday finally rejected the controversial National Water Resources Bill 2023 after it was listed for concurrence on the order paper for consideration and passage.
Well, the truth is, once and for all, the water resource bill, which many people had seen as an agenda, is being laid to rest simply because the Senate did not get the full details of the provisions before they got a concurrence. Now, this bill came up almost as a hydra-headed monster from the then, when they initially mentioned, what was that name? The Ruga. So from Ruga, it then moved into cattle colonies. And then from the cattle colony bill, we now heard of the water resource bill. Now, yes, just morphing itself around. And basically then the federal government in that bill was going to take over the ownership and management of waters and riverine locations around the country. And many of the 36 state governors, the subnationals, kicked against this, despite the position of the then Minister of Justice and Attorney General. Now, the truth is, the speaker in the closing said that Nigeria is a very diverse country and everybody's sensitivity must be taken into consideration. Now, I even though they've stepped down this bill, I hope in the next I hope in this administration, which is new, that they will put water resource, ocean economy into proper perspective. Nigeria, like every other water or coastal nation, has a lot of assets, riches, things that could make you and I rich, both at the public sector and the private sector. We need to work in consonance with both all the stakeholders required to be able to do this. And this is some of the reasons why foreign people have issues with Africa. How is it that you are blessed with such resources? You have the best seafood, you have the best fish, you have some of the best and cleanest waters, and yet you cannot make anything viable out of them. The little that's even being done is being done by foreign players and then being marred by lots of, sharks and pirates who are all over our waters and people cannot move around unprotected. I mean, if I can't make a road trip to the east via road for one reason or the other, either bad road or time, I should be able to go by boats. I should be able to take a boat to Warri from Lagos or take a boat from Bonny or Port Harcourt back to Lagos. I mean, that's how it should be. But it's not the case. And I hope this new government puts this right at the top of their agenda.
All right, really hope so. Let me take one more message really quickly because of time. Dami from the group who says a private individual who is serious and is ready to set up an airline doesn't need 8 years to do a static display. The entire National Carrier project was simply a white elephant project designed to feather private nests. The script was written and played out in public. And on that note, we have to call it a day on Freshly Pressed. Thank you so much, Devoe and Lakunle, for joining me to analyze the stories this morning.
Cool.
Appreciate your time as always. But you have yourself a great day. And yes, to all our listeners, thanks for all the messages. There's much more to come on Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1 at 8:15. In time for us to get into the locker room. Kekere will be here and we'll get to discuss all the major sports stories. Stay tuned.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. See you guys.
Have a
Ciao.
great day.
Yep.